Hello, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Woo! There we go. There's the background and the foreground.
Oh, do you want to turn that off?
My name is Lynn Wood. I'm a student services assistant at East Los Angeles College. This is my partner and my wife. And I'm here in this virtual world doing as much as I can to support our LGBTQ students. I'm the coordinator for a center called One Zone, and it's affiliated with our Dream Resource Center and Education Justice Scholars and LGBTQ, of course. So I'm speaking directly to our LGBTQ students. As part of this virtual world, I've been doing readings at home. So that's what I'm here doing today. I have a few resources to share with you. One is related to food, and that is the Garage Board Shop in East LA. They're located on Atlantic. They do their giveaways on Fridays. They are a walk-up giveaway. You just need to bring a cart or something to carry the food with. And then specifically for LGBTQ folks, Mi Centro in Boyle Heights, they have a pride pantry. They are a small organization, so they're only feeding about 10 families every week. So you do need to register for theirs, and you just need to email them. I believe it's the Latino Equality Alliance. I saw it on Instagram. So if you're following me on Instagram, I have the information posted in my stories. Oh, also housing. I wanted to talk about housing. I saw it's the company that's affiliated with the Showers of Hope. They're also doing housing, temporary housing. It's not just males anymore. They're now doing females. You get the information through our student health center. That's a valuable resource, even though we're in this virtual world. The student health center is still a valuable resource. And in fact, the company that is the service provider is called Via Care. They are still open for in-person services. They are located on Atlantic. I think it's 507 Atlantic for them, but they have 2 or 3 offices. So you, again, just Student Health Center on ELAC website to get linked to Via Care. But they're offering in-person services such as COVID testing, COVID vaccine. Of course, you know, if you're 65 or older, and I think educators start on March 1st. But if you call Via Care and let them know that you're an ELAC student, they'll just verify your student ID number, not that you've paid fees or anything like that. And then you're eligible for services. So I mentioned the COVID, but they also have well woman services, STD testing. So there's a lot of stuff you're eligible for just by being a registered student. I think that was it. I also wanted to give out my email address. It is woodcl@elac.edu. Feel free to send me an email. If you are a student or you know of a student that wants to enroll at ELAC, or you're stuck in the system yourself and you can't figure out, there are still short-term classes available. I saw where our counseling department on Instagram again posted about short-term classes are still available. Yeah, the book I have to read today is by Angela Davis, and it's called Freedom is a Constant Struggle. We're in the last week of Black History Month, so my Anne is coloring.
I'm going to color while she's reading.
Oh yeah, a Day of the Dead coloring book. I love this coloring book.
It's actually 2 books in one, and one of the things I like about it is you can pull it out, and so this way you can use stuff like gel pens. It doesn't like get all over the other page.
Gel pens and markers. Yay! That's one of my favorite coloring books because you can really go crazy with the colors, and I love all the different sugar skulls in there.
Yeah,
the Day of the Dead stuff.
I like this one.
Yeah. Okay. I think I mentioned it's the last week of Black History Month, so we're I'm continuing on with Freedom is a Constant Struggle, and just want to acknowledge this morning I heard, I believe it's today or yesterday, it's 1 year since Ahmaud Arbery was hunted down and slaughtered by white supremacists in Georgia. And so I would just like to send love out into the universe to his mom. And this book is like, it's her most recent book, but it's like a collection of essays, interviews, speeches, and this particular section is like an email exchange that she had with this person who was interviewing her. And the question they're asking, and I'll be sure to point out when they're asking a question and when is her answer, so it's clearer to you when you're listening. The first question is, or statement, I'm thinking again about the abolitionist movement, which is about a better society. It's not only about prison abolition, it's about much more than that. And she says in response, it is about prison abolition. It also inherits the notion of abolition from W.E.B. Du Bois, who wrote about the abolition of slavery. He pointed out the end of slavery per se was not going to solve the myriad of problems created by the institution of slavery. You could remove the chains, but if you did not develop the institutions that would allow for the incorporation of previously enslaved people into a democratic society, then slavery would not be abolished. In a sense, what we are arguing is that the prison abolition struggle follows the anti-slavery abolitionist struggle of the 19th century. The struggle for the abolitionist democracy is aspiring to create the institutions that will truly allow for a democratic society.
You know, I never thought of it like that. Because whenever you hear abolition, you always think of, you go back in your history, but taking the entire history,
Right.
like, okay.
Especially the history you weren't taught in school.
Man, that's why this is, sorry, I didn't mean to bang them.
That's why stuff like this book or anything you can expose yourself to that's outside of what you're being taught is really good. That's why books are really good. I mean, I chose to read a lot of books that I wasn't being told to read in school. And so I think that really enriches you.
Obviously, it elevates your mind.
Right. Gets you beyond the little area that you're stuck in.
It's good for your brain. It makes your brain better.
Oh, yeah. She was just reading a study recently that said that it actually develops your brain in a different way if you're a reader.
Yeah. Like if you never learned to read, you wouldn't have that.
Which is sad to me, but okay. The next part is the person asks, what about prisoners in prison? Can you talk about agency and struggles, prisoners and their own struggles? And she says, whenever you conceptualize social justice struggles, you will always defeat your own purposes if you cannot imagine the people around whom you are struggling in as equal partners. Therefore, and this is one of the problems with all of the reform movements, if you think of the prisoners simply as the objects of the charity of others, you defeat the very purpose of anti-prison work. You are constituting them as an inferior in the process of trying to defend their rights. The abolitionist movement has learned that without the actual participation of prisoners, there can be no campaigns. That is matter of fact. Many prisoners have contributed to the development of the consciousness, the abolition of the prison industrial complex. It may not always be easy to guarantee the participation of prisoners, but without their participation and without acknowledging them as equals, we are bound to fail. As you were referring to the need to ensure that there are women represented, you have to go a little bit further. I give you some examples. Prisoners are able to make collect calls, and therefore, how do you allow prisoners to participate in meetings? It doesn't really, it's just someone going down the hall, Pilar. Thin walls, a big building. The cat's like, oh my God, what is that? It's just someone walking down the hallway. As you're referring to the need to ensure that women are represented, make collect calls, how do they participate in meetings? It doesn't really take much technology to rig up an amplification apparatus to a telephone and have people call in. I did an event in Mumbai, Abu Jamal. I was on stage with a telephone. Mumia called in and he was able to address the entire audience. I'm like, I don't know why my mind is so blown by that.
Yeah, like
We have to think about those processes. I work with a women's prison organization in Australia, directed by Debbie Kilroy, called Sisters Inside. Whenever I go to Australia, I'm about to go now, we always go into the prison because a good portion of the leadership of the organization is in prison. It's so easy to just forget to think about the prison and its population abstractly. If you're serious about developing egalitarian relationships, you will figure out how to make these connections, how to stay in touch with people behind bars, how to allow their voices to be heard. Okay, next the person says, we cannot be lazy. How do we do that? How do we win men to fight for women liberation? How do we win whites to struggle against racism and for the emancipation of people of color? It's the same thinking, right? And she says in reply, well, it is. We have to extract ourselves from narrow identitarian thinking if we want to encourage progressive people to embrace these struggles as their own. With respect to feminist struggles, men will have to do a lot of the important work. I often like to talk about feminism not as something that adheres to bodies, not as something grounded in gendered bodies, but as an approach, as a way of conceptualizing, as a methodology, as a guide to strategies for struggle. Feminism is not a unitarian phenomenon, so that increasingly there are men who are involved in feminist studies. For example, as a professor, I see increasing numbers of men majoring in feminist studies, which is a good thing. In the abolitionist movement, I see a particularly young men who have a very rich feminist perspective. And so how does one guarantee that will happen? It will not happen without work. Both men and women and trans persons, for that matter, have to do that work. But I don't think it's a question of women inviting men to struggle. I think it's about a certain kind of consciousness that has to be encouraged to be progressive. Men are aware that they have a certain responsibility to bring in more men. Men often talk to men in a different way. It's important for those who might want to bring into the struggle to look at models. What does it mean to model feminism as a man? I tour the campuses regularly and I was speaking at the University of Southern Illinois during a Black History Month celebration. And I came into contact with a group of young men who are members of a group they call Alternative Masculinites. Fascinating. And I was totally impressed by them. They work with the Women's Center. They've been trained in how to do rape crisis calls. They were really seriously engaging in all that kind of activism that you assume that only women can do.
So they're not just bronies?
And I then remembered that many years ago in the 1970s, there were a couple of men's formations like Men Against Rape and Black Men Against Rape, domestic violence, against domestic violence. And I remember thinking then that it's just a matter of time before this gets taken up by men all over. But it never happened. So I was reminded by these young men in alternative masculinites that they're, after all these decades, they should today represent a far more popular trend. But this is the kind of thing that needs to be happening. It doesn't happen by itself. It doesn't happen automatically. You have to intervene. You have to make conscious interventions. So I think she's saying she's for it. Next, the person says about the death penalty, is there actually a chance to abolish at the state level in the United States? And she says back, well, fortunately, there are some signs that it might be possible to abolish the death penalty in New York, for example. Of course, there have been moments in certain states that it most feels like we're on the verge of abolishing and then it doesn't happen. Even if people are not executed, it remains on the books. When Troy Davis was killed on September 21st, 2011, there was an international movement. People were convinced that the state of Georgia was not going to execute him, but they did. I don't know whether they're ever going to abolish the death penalty without a mass movement, and the state approach may take far too long. That's sad. I think a lot of states have it on hold, but like to her point, it's still on the books. My thing about the death penalty is I'm not against it, but I am against people being put to death that have not had DNA testing done. DNA testing sometimes can rule out the person, and they've been sitting in jail for 30 something years and they didn't freaking do it.
Makes all the difference.
Yeah, so especially all the Black and brown people that are in jail. Many of them are in jail wrong. Sorry.
No, you're correct.
And my wife, my partner, is also going to read Zami by Audre Lorde. This is such a good book. What does she say it is? A mythography?
She calls it a biomythography.
A biomythography. Like it's about me, but I made some shit up.
No,
I love that.
I don't think she's saying she. It's not really like she's making stuff up.
No, I know, but like I love the name and the idea of that, not making shit up, but you sometimes when you recall stuff, you maybe add stuff that wasn't there before, and it's not like it's being made up, but you're embellishing the story just slightly.
And it's not like she's writing about herself either, really. It's she's writing about her whole family.
Right.
And
that's kind of hard to get
and the way
actually accurate.
And society, and the way society has treated her and how she feels about society, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, up to chapter 13. She goes to a high school called Hunter High School in New York City, Manhattan. In my first year at Hunter, there were 3 other Black girls in my term, although not in my class. One of them was very proper, and she avoided all the branded with great care. The other 2 girls came from the same school in Queens, and they hung together in self-protection. In the middle of my freshman year, 2 more Black girls came to Hunter. One was sister to Yvonne Greenidge, who had dated my cousin Jerry. This brought my totally separate worlds of school and home threateningly close together. I was accustomed to thinking of them as separate planets. The other girl was Jenny. Jenny was the beginning of a double life for me at Hunter. Actually, it was a triple life. There was the Branded, with whom I held seances and raised the ghosts of Byron and Keats. There was Maxine, my shy piano-playing Jewish friend, with whom I roamed the locker rooms after curfew, and who later had a nervous breakdown because she was afraid of dying of leprosy. And there was Jenny. Each part of my school life was separate from the other, with no connection except through me. None of the other people involved would have anything to do with each other. Maxine thought the Branded were too dangerous and Jenny too flamboyant. The Branded thought Maxine was a mama's baby and Jenny a snob. Jenny thought they were all bores and so loudly at any provocation, and said so loudly at any provocation. You surely do hang around with some funny people. They act like they think the stars are their garters. I laughed as she stuffed her toe shoes with lamb's wool and tied them around her ankles. Jenny was always either coming from or going to dance class. I shared classes and lunchtime with the Branded, some lunches and after school time with Maxine, and study periods, and every other chance I could get with Jenny. She was the only one I saw on weekends. Suddenly, life became an exciting game of how much time I could spend with the people I wanted to spend time with. We learned to appreciate each other's softness behind the lockers, calling it all kinds of names and games, from touch tag to how does that feel to I can hit harder than you, until Jenny said to me one day, stop hitting the book. Stop. Until Jenny said to me one day, is that the only way you know how to make friends? And right then and there, I began to learn other ways. I learned how to feel first and ask questions afterward. I learned how to cherish first the facade and then the fact of being an outlaw. That spring term, Jenny and I did things that I thought made the Branded look like kindergarten kids. We smoked in the bathrooms and on the street. We played hooky from school and forged notes for each other in our mother's handwriting. We hid out at Jenny's house and toasted marshmallows in her mother's bed. What? What?
What?
We stole nickels from our mother's purses and roamed Fifth Avenue singing Union songs. We played sexy games with the Latino boys up in the bluffs of granites above the Morningside Park. And we did a lot of talking. The Berlin airlift was just beginning, and the state of Israel represented a newly born hope for human dignity. Our budding political consciousness had already soared our wait. Our budding political consciousness had already soured us on Coca-Cola democracy. Jenny had been trained in classical ballet. I never saw her dance except privately for me. In the beginning of our junior year, she left Hunter so she could have more time to dance, she said. Actually, it was because she hated to do schoolwork. Our friendship then became less connected with school. She's killing me. Jenny was the first person in my life that I was ever conscious of loving. She was my first true friend. The summer of 1948 was a time of powerful change all over the world. Jenny and I felt ourselves a part of it, as did most of the girls at Hunter High. We envied the girls who were Jewish and who already were making plans to go to Israel and work on a kibbutz in the new nation. The mild-mannered, skinny little man in the white sheet had prevailed, and India was finally free, referring to, I can't say his name. The mild-mannered, skinny little man in the white sheet had prevailed, and India was free, but they had killed him for it. There was no longer any doubt in anybody's mind that China would soon be Red China, and 3 cheers for the communists. My revolutionary fervor had begun with a white waitress refusing to serve my family ice cream in the nation's capital, was becoming a clearer and clearer position, a lens through which to view the school. Yeah, she wrote a chapter on that. It was very powerful. We had huddled under school desks for air raid drills and had shaken with terror at the idea of a whole city instantly destroyed by a bomb of atoms. We had danced in the streets and listened to the horns of the fire engines and tugboats in the river the day the war was over. For us in 1948, peace was a very real and vivid issue. Thousands of American boys had died to make the world safe for democracy, even though my family and I couldn't be served ice cream in Washington, D.C. But we were going to change all that, Jenny and I, in our full skirts and ballet slippers, the new look. There was a wind blowing all over the world, and we were a part of it. Jenny lived with her mother in a one-bedroom kitchenette apartment on 119th between 8th and Morningside Avenues. Jenny had the bedroom, and her mother, Louisa, slept on a wide couch in the living room. Louisa went to work every day. I woke Jenny up to whatever time I woke Jenny up whatever time I came over, cutting summer school, and we spent the next few hours deciding what she should wear and who we were going to be for the world on that particular day. If we did not have something suitable, we stitched and pinned an assortment of wide skirts and kerchiefs into place. Since Jenny was slimmer than I, we often had to alter things on the spot to fit me, but always in such a way that it could be easily restored. We took hours and hours tiring each other, sometimes changing entire outfits at the last minute to become two different people, complementing each other always. We blossomed forth finally after hours of tacking and pinning and last minute ironing board decisions. That summer, all of New York, including its museums and parks and avenues, was our backyard. What we wanted and couldn't afford, we stole money from our mothers for. Bandits, gypsies, foreigners of all degree, witches, whores, and Mexican princesses. There were appropriate costumes for every role and appropriate places in the city to go to play them all out. There were always things to do to match whomever we decided to be. When we decided to be workers, we wore loose pants and packed our shoe-dyed lunch boxes and tied red bandanas around our throats. We rode up and down Fifth Avenue on the old open door double-decker omnibuses, shouting and singing Union songs at the top of our lungs. Solidarity forever. The Union makes us strong. When the Union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run. When we decided to be hussies, we wore tight skirts and high heels that hurt, and followed handsome, respectable-looking lawyers down Fifth and Park Avenues, making what we thought were salacious, worldly comments about their anatomies in loud voices. What a beautiful behind he has. I bet he sleeps bare angle. That was a Hunter euphemism for naked. He's pretending not to hear us. Foolish boy. No, he's just too embarrassed to turn around. When we were African, we wrapped our heads in gaily printed skirts and talked our own made up language in the subway on our way down to the village. That must have been hilarious. When we were Mexican, we wore full skirts and peasant blouses and huaraches and ate tacos, which we bought at a little stall in front of Fred Layton's on McDougal Street. Once we exchanged the word fucker for mother and a whole day's conversation and got put off the number 5 bus by an irate driver. Oh, shit. Sometimes we roamed through the village in dirndl skirts and cinch belts with flowers in our hair, taking turns strumming Jenny's guitar and singing songs which we adapted from Pablo Neruda's early poems. All you red Yankees are sons of a shrimp, born of a bottle of rum. I guess it's shrum. Born of a bottle of rum. Sometimes we made up our own. Drinking gin, goddamn drinking gin, goddamn drinking gin. If you won't drink gin with me, goddamn, you won't drink no gin with no damn man. Drinking gin, goddamn drinking gin. To the most monotonous plunking beat. In the village, we met Jenny's friend Jean, who was a dancer also. She was dark and beautiful and lived around the corner from Jenny and went to the High School of Music and Art. Nice. Jean was engaged to a white boy named Alf, who had left school and gone to Mexico to paint with Diego Rivera. Sometimes I accompanied them to one of their dance classes at the new dance group on 59th Street. But mostly, Jenny and I went out to the city by ourselves. By tacit agreement, we usually didn't see each other on weekends that summer because of our families. Weekends became endlessly dull bridges between Monday and Friday, between Friday and Monday. The whole summer was made up of glorious and exciting days with Genevieve and evenings of war at home, commencing with my mother's. Where have you been all day? And why aren't your clothes done? Or my room cleaned, or the kitchen floor washed, or the milk bought? We sallied forth in the afternoon sun to launch our joint assault upon the city. On the days when we had no money for car fare downtown, we went to Central Park to watch the bears. Sometimes we just held hands and walked through the streets of Harlem around her house. They seemed so much more alive to me than the streets of Washington Heights, where I lived. I also grew up there. They reminded me of the streets around where I grew up and on 142nd Street. I guess that used to be part of Washington Heights, but it seems to me then that became part of Harlem later. We bought and ate ices. We bought and ate ices, which were scraped up from a block of ice and packed into a little paper cup, and then liberally covered with brilliant sticky syrups kept in a rainbow of bottles lined up on either side of the ice.
My mouth watered.
We called them piraguas because it was always an old Puerto Rican man. Piraguas. They were sold from rickety homemade wooden wagons with bright umbrellas shielding the ice, which was always slowly melting under an indifferently clean old Turkish towel. These chilly cups of shaved ice were the most deliciously cooling, confection in the world. Made more so by the vehemence with which both of our mothers had forbidden them to us. My goodness.
Can you imagine?
No, and it was only like, well, when I got it in the 60s, it was like 5 or 10 cents.
I was gonna say it had to be like only 2 or 3 cents. So
Yeah, so like probably a couple of cents then. These chilly cups of shaved ice were the most deliciously cooling confection in the world, made more so by the vehemence with which both of our mothers had forbidden them to us. Ices were suspected by many Black mothers of spreading polio through Harlem, and they were to be shunned, along with public swimming pools. It's true at that time.
the public swimming pools, yes,
Yeah,
but the icing,
I know.
I don't see how she made that connection.
Girl, and a hot day like that in New York City. Eventually, the icy carts were banned from the streets by Mayor LaGuardia. It's probably temporarily. By Mayor LaGuardia. Wherever we were, as the shadows of late afternoon began to grow long, we began to wind our way homeward. We both knew that there was only so much we could presume before our freedom would be cut off, and we tried to keep this side of that line. Sometimes we goofed and overstepped some ignored rule, and then Jenny would be decked for a few days. For me at home, punishment was always much more swift and direct and short, and many days that summer my arms and back were sore from whatever handy weapon my mother could lay her hands on to hit me with. When Jenny was decked, I would go over to her house for the day. We sat and talked and drank coffee at the kitchen table, or lay naked on her mother's sofa bed in the living room and listened to the radio and drank champagne, which the corner store man gave Jenny on credit because he thought it was for her mother.
Oh my God, scandalous little girl.
I know, it's the oldest trick, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sometimes we talked about buying cigarettes the other day, remember?
Yes, yes.
Sometimes we visited her grandmother who lived upstairs, and she would let us play her Nat King Cole records.
So sweet.
Dance, I can't remember how it goes, but it's dance, ballerina dance, and do your pirouettes and rhythm with your aching heart. Nat King Cole song. Jenny's mother had raised Genevieve alone from the time she was an infant. Her father had left Louisa before Genevieve was born. I liked Mrs. Thompson. Sorry, I took my eye off it. I liked Mrs. Thompson. She was young and pretty and very reasonable, I thought, compared to my mother. She had been to college, and that made her somehow even more acceptable in my eyes. She and Jenny could talk to each other in a way not possible between my mother and me. Louisa seemed very modern. Genevieve and she shared many of the same interests and the same clothes, and I thought how exciting it must be to have a mother who wore and liked the same kinds of clothes you did. That summer, Genevieve met her father.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to stop.
Okay, then right there should be good. Who wore the same kind of clothes you did.
The end.
Well, no.
It's a long chapter. It's a great book. I highly recommend
Well,
Zami. That's what it was called.
yeah.
That's what it's called. I mean, Audre Lorde is incredible, but this book has been so good so far.
Also, I think we have a book of her essays, and I believe I have a book for poetry as well. But I like this because, even though I know that she's calling it like a biomythography, it feels more like fiction to me. You know what I mean? Most fiction is based on somebody's life somewhere anyway, So
I agree. That's probably maybe why it's been such a good book to me, is it does seem like fiction.
Because the chapters are all like individual, like a
vignette.
Yeah, like an actual story. Anyway.
Yeah. Love Audre Lorde, of course. The book I read by Angela Davis is her most recent book. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. The dog across the way is barking like crazy. I'm sure you can hear it. Yeah, it's Tuesday. Hope you have a great day. It's kind of warm. I hope you're staying cool wherever you are, and that you are safe and cool instead of safe and warm. Okay.
Unless it's cold where you are, then stay warm.
Yes.
It could be someplace where it's snowing, like.
I guess that's true. So far, I've only had 2 candy bars to eat today, so I feel a little loopy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, take care.